Months had passed since the haunting of Henry's tunnel had ceased, but nonetheless the engines still keep the troubled soul of Mary deep in their thoughts. And so, the engine went as fast as he could, but the ghost caught up to him, said James in a spooky tone of voice. The others looked at him with raised eyebrows. James, you wouldn't know a good and convincing ghost story if it came and bit you on the back of the buffers, chuckled Henry. Nor would an engine who is afraid of the rain he runs and hides in tunnels, snarled James. Edward, who had been sitting in silence in the far corner of the shed, cleared his throat to get the others' attention. Throughout my working life, I have been witness to many ghostly events, he said quietly. Given James's haughty attitude this evening, one story particularly comes to mind. The others looked at the old engine with great interest. Please tell us, they all said together. So Edward took a deep breath and began his story. It was during the First World War in 1915 when I first arrived on the railway around the same time as Thomas. The island played an active part in the war effort by manufacturing gunpowder and explosives which would be transported to the other railway by goods train. The War Department had sent over an engine without a name, only a number, 260. He was an engine who was far too big for his wheels and thought he knew better than anyone else. Worst of all, he was rough-riding and careless. One rainy and misty night, 260 was rostered to take the ammunition train to the other railway. I warned him to be careful, but he took no notice. The rain thundered down as 260 struggled through the rain. But as he neared the border between Vicarstown and Barrow, 260 bumped violently along the line, which caused the ammunition wagons along with the engine to explode. I was sent with the breakdown crane and emergency service crews to see it. It was most horrifying. Exactly 1 year after the fatal accident, the bell rang in the signal box to indicate an engine was on its way. The signalman waited 10 minutes, and then a ghostly figure of an engine rushed past the box, whistling fit to burst, but disappeared as soon as it cleared the signal. And some say that every misty rainy night around midnight, 260's spirit can be seen thundering along the line and fading into the unknown. Edward finished his story, taking another deep breath, and looked over at the line of engines staring at him in awe. Stuff and nonsense, snorted James. There's no such things as ghosts, and you of all engines, my dear Edward, shouldn't be trying to scare others, let alone yourself with such fairy tales. Due to James's pride, he had seemed to have forgotten about his encounter with Mary's spirit some months earlier. No one said anything, for they knew if they replied, James will go on for the rest of the night. Bear and Burko often take turns in taking the midnight goods train to the other railway, where it is picked up by another engine who takes it onto the Midlands, but both diesels were away for repairs, which meant the Fat Controller had to reschedule one of the steam engines to take their place. The Fat Controller had chosen James, and the red engine was not impressed. He treated the trucks roughly as he banged them about. I spent all day pulling dirty goods trains, and now the Fat Controller wants to deprive me of a good night's rest by making me chase the midnight goods. It's not fair at all, he protested as he forcefully bumped into a truck. That evening, the sky went a dark grey over Tidmouth. Edward looked solemnly up. Heavy mist and rain is on the way, he said in a low, quiet voice. You'll best be careful when you take the midnight goods, he said to James, who was still in a foul mood about the evening's arrangements. The sooner those two boxes on wheels are back at work, the better, he sneered. Edward eyed James worriedly. Watch out for engine 260, he said. James rolled his eyes. There is no such thing as ghost, Edward. Stop scaring yourself with these make-believe stories. The men had oiled James's joints, his fire was lit, and warmth spread through his boiler. This made him feel much better, since it was a cold night. The midnight goods departs from the yards outside the big station at 9:45, and reaches Barrow precisely at 12 midnight. The mist had begun to settle as James backed down onto the trucks. James simmered quietly as the men were making the final preparations. But Edward's story played on his mind. He looked around the yard. It was silent only for a few lines of trucks and coaches in the sidings. Just then, Gordon rocketed by with the express, whistling long and loudly. This almost made James jump off the rails. Been scared of Gordon, said James to himself. How silly I am. It was soon time to depart. The signal dropped, and James steamed out of the yard with his long goods train. The mist got heavier as James snorted through the valley, but up ahead was a red signal. James's driver reduced steam, and they came to a stop. James and his crew were confused. I don't understand it, puzzled the driver. Gordon passed with the express long ago. James is the only engine on the line. But he was wrong. A loud, shrill, and unfamiliar whistle could be heard from a distance. James gasped in amazement as a ghostly shape of an engine emerged from the mist, whistling fit to burst. It was heading straight for James. The driver and fireman jumped out of the way, anticipating a collision. But once the train neared James's buffers, it disappeared into thin air. James opened his eyes and found the line ahead of him was clear. He said nothing. His driver and fireman climbed back into the cab and continued onto the other railway. When they arrived at Barrow, James silently shunted the trucks into a siding. When James returned the next day, he was still in shock. Edward could see James's expression of fright as he puffed past the red engine. He whispered in a low voice, "Don't say I didn't warn you."